People, welcome to Newspaper Breakdown. It is the 29th of the 3rd. I hope we're all... we'll start with the NHS. Public satisfaction with the NHS in England, Scotland and Wales has fallen to the lowest level since public views were recorded 40 years ago. So that is Labour, Tory and SNP, a trifecta of useless fucks. With 7 million people queuing for hospital treatment and the worst A&E waits and ambulance response times on record, the growing demand and staff vacancies, the British Social Attitudes Survey found overall satisfaction in the NHS fell to 29%. That is a fall of 7 percentage points year on year and the fourth largest year drop recorded. Dissatisfaction is also at an all-time high, doubling since 2020, with more than half of the respondents unhappy with the standard of service. Interestingly, in 2010, the satisfaction with the NHS hit a record high of 70%. Now, causation correlation, of course, we all know the saying, but you yourselves can have a look back at something that may have happened in 2010 and think to yourself, well, what could have caused the NHS to be so shit? As I say, that's for you. That's only for you to work out for yourselves. I'm not here to just tell you my opinions. The principles of the NHS, this is good news by the way, the principles of the NHS, which is free of charge when you need it, available for everyone and primarily funded through taxes, is still massively believed in. The people of this country still believe in the NHS. They just want it to be better, which isn't a mad idea really, is it? So this constant want to privatise it fundamentally goes against, how would you say, the will of the people. Next story, the new chair of the UN Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities has said that the lack of available data means people with disabilities remain lost and excluded from rescue operations in disasters like earthquakes and floods. Gertrude Fafome, a long-term disability rights advocate, became the first African woman to lead the committee when she was elected this month. People with disabilities and the organisations representing them are not consulted in programmes dealing with disaster management and assessing risks, which is stupid, isn't it? It's stupid. And in many places, there is no data available on who is living with which disability. And of course, if you're not told to look for something, the chances of you looking for something is slim. So if you're going there to rescue people from a flood or an earthquake, and you're not told that there are disabled people in that village, say, you're not going to have the equipment to help them. And so it's going to be harder, more dangerous, and they're going to be lost. Fafome said that the progress on achieving equal rights was lagging behind, especially after the pandemic, which highlighted the gaps and taken persons with disabilities many steps backwards in all areas. Of course, with all of these stories, there is always a selection of people who are more fucked than others. This time, women. Women and girls with disabilities are more likely to face sexual violence, and rate of domestic violence rose during lockdown around the world. Fafome explained that people who lose their jobs and a steady income are more vulnerable and dependent on others who may abuse them. Many women with disabilities are likely to be begging on the streets or dependent on someone to do them a favour. It's one of those things you think it must be so easy to get that data. But then I've never been in government. I do not know how easy it is to get that data. It may be incredibly difficult. I can't see it, but what do I know? Anyway, back to the UK. The Independent Commission for Aid Impact, which is a government independent watchdog on aid, has found that a third of the UK's overseas aid budget was spent by the Home Office on housing refugees in a poorly managed programme that contained few cost-saving incentives. The ICAI recommended introducing a cap on the amount of the budget that can be spent on in-donor refugee costs. I think that's personally a good idea. The review estimates £3.5 billion of the overseas aid budget was spent on refugees in the UK in 2022. With such a large amount, of course, causing major disruptions to the overseas aid programme that we currently have. Don't forget, we've cut the aid programme as well. I think it's 7%. We've cut that down, so we're cutting that even more in our attempts to help the fucking rest of the world. The watchdog also found evidence that refugees were being mistreated in some of the accommodation. That's important to remember for a story coming up. Under UK law, the Home Office is entitled to access the overseas aid budget to cover the first year costs of refugees. The report said that the Foreign Office, lacking an accurate forecast from the Home Office of a sharply rising official development assistance spend on in-donor refugees, on in-donor refugee costs, was forced to put its own programming on hold, despite the risks to its partnerships and the many people around the world who rely on UK development and humanitarian aid. It goes to show that the Home Office, continually being so fucking useless and expensive, are not just affecting, say, refugees in this country or the police force or judiciary or anything else. It is affecting people around the world. Its incapability of doing something of use affects the fucking world. The Home Office has faced a critical shortage of accommodation for refugees and asylum seekers due to large visa schemes established for refugees from Afghanistan and Ukraine. It should be important to remember that the Afghanistan one especially, we've taken in hardly anyone. It's all fucking words. We haven't taken in many people at all. The increasing number of asylum seekers crossing the Channel and the growing backlog in asylum claims processing. Asylum claim processing, this has been a problem for a while. Once again, something that the Home Office could have done something about, but seemingly unwilling to do so. Also finding that the high value private contracts engaged by the Home Office to provide accommodation and services did not present value for money. That is an important thing. We have seen before the pandemic, but certainly during and after, just how bad this government is with money. The amount of waste that goes on with this government is shocking, truly shocking. And so every time they say to you, we just don't have the money, you should ask yourself why. Because the answer is they've wasted it. The government has wasted it. They've wasted all of the money, all your taxes. It is a continual waste. They do not do anything that is cost effective. They do not do anything that is cost saving. They just piss money up a wall and fail. You remember the bit, the evidence of refugees that were being mistreated in some of the accommodation. Important to remember for this story. Deputy PM and not all men enthusiast Dominic Raab has said nothing is off the table when it comes to reducing the use of hotels to house asylum seekers, which reportedly costs £6 million a day. Raab claimed that plush hotel accommodation served as an incentive for small boat crossings, adding that many asylum seekers were effectively abusing the system. This comes as the government is set to announce plans to house asylum seekers in barges, vessels and military bases. Now, Robert Jenrick, the corrupt Tory MP, has announced today the start of this, with 3 military bases are going to be used to house refugees. Now, it is important to see just how good advertising is and how much it works, because seemingly it has convinced Dominic Raab that people are risking their lives in the hope to stay at a fucking travel lodge. Which I don't personally think that's happening. Also, see from the previous story, where the watchdog, the ICAI, found evidence that refugees were being mistreated in some of the accommodation. You know, the plush, the incentives. That's what you want. You want to come over here on a fucking lilo, spend all your money to go and be abused in a fucking Premier Inn. Of course, mate. Of course they do. It is their dream. I hear that is one of their fucking dreams. They wish upon a pissing star on it, you tedious cunt. Well, we got 2 more stories. According to the Climate Change Committee, there has been a lost decade in effects to adapt to the impacts of global heating, and the UK is strikingly underprepared for the impacts of a climate crisis. The CCC is the government's official climate advisor and has warned repeatedly of poor preparation in the past, and has said that the government action was now urgently needed to protect people and their homes and livelihoods. As an example and warning, during the 2022 heatwave, more than 3,000 people died and 20% of all hospital operations were cancelled at the peak. Rail lines buckled, wildfires raged, and farmers struggled with the drought. Areas where needed action is missing include heat-proofing homes, stemming leaks in water supply pipes, and preparing for flash floods and shortages of food and other imports from nations struck by climate impacts. According to the CCC, acting early would be cheaper and better. It's again another prime example of the government wasting money. Short-termism. If we don't spend any money here, then we can make it seem that the economy's going better and everything's fine and we're not spending a lot of money and everything's lovely, and we can give those lovely little bankers a lovely little bonus so that they can be nice and we can get on our knees and we can suck them all off. Delightful, what a world. A recent report by the IPCC showed that the climate damages were hitting harder and faster than expected, with global temperatures not stopping rising until we reach net zero carbon emissions, with most countries setting that for 2050. So about 30 years of still being fucked until we reach the level where we're meant to. The CCC report said, fully credible UK government planning was found for only 5 of the 45 adaptation requirements examined, and there was not sufficient implementation of adaptation plans in any of the 45 areas. If you can show me one part of the country where the government is doing well, I will buy you a fucking biscuit. You can hold me to that as well. Only the first person. I'm not made of biscuits. I wonder if you'd be happier if you were made of biscuits. Life would be shorter. You'd be crumbly. Someone may eat you, eh? Christ on a bike. Finally, to my favourite company, Thames Water has been told by the Environment Agency that it needs to do more to fix the 630 million litres of water it leaks a day before it starts taking water from the River Thames or Wales to tackle drought problems. Thames Water wanted to take millions of litres of water from the Thames and Wales and replace it with treated effluent. This was a story that I'd covered weeks ago. The Thames Water's plan was to take water from the Thames and replace it with shit, and everyone was like, I'm not a fan of that idea. But the EA actually doing its job for once, which is surprising because they are useless, has told Thames Water that it needs to think again to justify its decisions. The EA said, given the size of the leakage issues faced by Thames Water, we expect the company to invest in new research and development to identify ways it could substantially reduce leakage further than the 50% reduction target by 2050. Another 2050. What is it about 2050 that everyone's going, mate, that's the fucking time. That is the time, mate. Because a lot of them doing it will be dead by that point, so I won't have to give a fuck. This is just Thames Water is one of the worst companies in this country, but I'm not sure if have you been seeing the adverts that have been coming along from Thames Water, because what it is it's people in like their homes and they're sitting and they're like watching TV or they're eating meals or they're just having fun. It's while you are having fun, Thames Water is fixing a leak. While you're having a shower, Thames Water is fixing a leak. While you're out with your friends, Thames Water is fixing a leak. My question is, why so many fucking leaks? That would be my question at the end of every fucking advert. Thames Water, why have you done so badly that you have to spend your days and nights and fucking weekends fixing leaks? Because you haven't done your job, that's it. And what they want to do is continue to not do their job and instead fucking swap the Thames for a pile of shit. Literally shit. Well, that's it for today. Bye.